Hey guys, Dr. Mike Israetel here for Renaissance Periodization and Juggernaut Training Systems, talking to you about hamstring hypertrophy, how to get jacked hams. We'll start with what the maintenance volume is for hamstrings. That is kind of the minimum amount of volume you need to actually maintain hamstring gains if you've gained some hamstring size before. Why does this even come in handy? Well, two ways. One way in which it comes handy is sometimes in proper physique training, what you're going to want to do is take a maintenance phase or a low volume training phase for maybe a month or two to resensitize your muscles for future growth, because you keep banging away hypertrophy all the time. At some point your muscles just become resistant to growth pretty much no matter what you do, and you can't add more stuff because you're already up to your maximum ability to perform. You take a maintenance phase where all your training is hard enough to keep that size, the wheels of adaptation start to turn again, and then you can have another productive several months of training. The second place that hamstring training minimum volume is, maintenance volume is concerned, is if you want to really prioritize other muscle groups and you're going to reduce your hamstring training to make more room in your total body systemic MRV, your systemic ability to handle volume, then you want to know how low you can move them without moving too low so that you suffer losses, because you don't want to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You want to take 1.75 steps forward, but 0 steps back is a better alternative. So those are two interesting factors of why we need to know our maintenance volume for hamstrings. Maintenance volume here is only 4 sets per week. Sounds like not a lot, and it really isn't that much. The trick is they should be heavy sets, and they should probably be mostly hip hinge type of movements where you're actually bending at the hip. The hip hinge movements disrupt hamstring homeostasis considerably because of the super crazy eccentric loading that occurs. The damage from that and the stimulus is really big. Only 4 sets of that and you're good to go as far as maintenance for months on end. For the minimum effective volume, individuals can see growth with as few as 6 sets a week of hamstring work. Sounds like not much, but again, if this is very hard training, usually very heavy, and proper technique, your hamstrings get messed up from very little indeed. Maximum adaptive volume for most individuals occurs between 10 and 16 sets a week. To be completely honest with you guys, I haven't seen too many people respond well to 16 sets of hams a week. That's overkill for most people. You should probably be on the lower end most of the time, around that 10 set area, and wave up and about that. MRV, the highest volume tolerated I've ever seen for hamstrings for any length of time, is about 20 sets per week. Usually that's for individuals that tend to be more slow twitch, that have a long history of high level training volume, former endurance runners. They might be able to take that sort of beating. Most people don't. So please do not watch this video and immediately go to 20 sets because you want all the gains. Start at 6, see how it goes. Work your way up from there nice and slow. Frequency wise, 2 to 3 times a week seems sufficient. Hamstrings are really disrupted, especially by hip hinge movements. A ton of eccentric damage. They tend to be more fast twitch muscles on average, and that means their recovery times tend to be longer. Working out your hamstrings 4 sessions a week is possible. Most of those won't be overloading sessions because you have to keep so far behind from stimulating anything because you need that recovery time. 2 to 3 sessions are totally okay for most individuals. Intensity, we actually have a split here, unlike our other videos where there's general intensity. For hip hinge movements, 75 to 85% of your 1RM, usually in the 6 to 10 rep range, is where most hip hinges should be done. Good mornings, glute ham raises, stiff-legged deadlifts, those are the meat and potato big hamstring builders. They should be done pretty heavy. On the other hand, for hamstring curls, which are important because they hit parts of the muscles that hip hinges do not, and they round out the look for you, hamstring curls should be done for safety purposes, and because hip hinges have already taken care of heavy stuff, much lighter, somewhere between 60 and 75% of 1RM, 10 to 15, 10 to 20 reps even are good for curls, right? For range of motion, here's the deal. I don't know how many times I've seen people say they don't feel hamstrings with stiff-legged deadlifts or good mornings. You have to go deep in order to literally create the eccentric pulling apart damage to the hamstrings. That's why you're doing that exercise. You want to feel the contraction when you're doing curls. And I recommend with curls, pausing at the very top of the movement and then slowly extending your leg, pausing and slowly extending. For hip hinges, you need to go slow. You need to drop your chest slow And a huge part here, you always want a very arched lower back. If you let your lower back round as you do hip hinges, you're not hinging the hip. You're just letting your lumbar spine round over. It's a fine lower back workout, even though it's probably not super safe for the back if you're doing heavy loads, but it's not going to hit your hamstrings. You have to isolate the hamstrings by arching your back hard, usually keeping your chest up and your shoulders back. Watch a stiff-legged deadlift or RDL video by Olympic weightlifters. You'll know exactly how to do, that's proper hamstring work right there. If you do good mornings, it's the same technique with the bar on your neck as opposed to the bar in your hands. That is critical for hamstring work, and range of motion has to be full. Now, some people have very flexible hamstrings. They'll need to bend almost to parallel, sometimes even more. If you have really flexible hamstrings, you can put your toes, when you stand on the ground, on top of little 2.5 plates. That pre-stretches your hamstrings for you, makes them easier to hit. Most individuals won't be able to go that low if you have to go to try to hit the floor on stiff-legged deadlifts, or to try to hit the pins or go to a certain depth on good mornings. If you have to round your back to do it, you're not training hamstrings anymore. Depth should be self-selected based on your own flexibility. How do you know you're going low enough? There's a deep, painful stretch, but your back is still tight. That's the key. Your knees are back, your hips are up, your back is tight. When there's a deep, painful stretch for like a second and you're still descending, come on up, you're good to go after that. Let's see what we have next. Periodization. Hamstrings are so predominantly fast twitch, there doesn't need to be a lot of metabolite work. You can throw in a metabolite phase, so you go from a general phase of just regular volume, you get into a high volume phase. You can do metabolite work before going into your strength phase for maintenance. Usually not super necessary. So what you can do with hamstrings is have a very low volume work, and then moderate volume work, and then go into maintenance phase after that. If you want to do some kind of metabolite stuff, especially for the curling, hamstring curls, if you want to do giant or marathon sets, people call them different things. You clip, a 20 rep max into the stack. You do almost as many as you can. You wait about a minute or 30 seconds. You repeat until you hit a certain total number of reps, maybe 60 reps of curls. That'll mess you up good and plenty. Lastly, here's the deal. If you want the biggest hams that you're capable of having, only leg curls will not get you there. You have to do, in my belief, heavy hip hinge movements. Big hams are built by 225 pounds for 8 rep good mornings, high bar. They're built with a 405 pound stiff-legged deadlift, strict as low as possible for sets of 8. Meet individuals that can do that, almost certainly they have big hamstrings. Curls are great as an additive, maybe 30% of your program. Most of your work should be in heavy hip hinges, and it's going to take time to grow hams like everything else. Stay safe, always mind your technique, and we'll see you back for another video. Take care.